I'm Mariah LaGuardia, 26, and I built my life from the ground up after being left behind, literally. For years, I bent over backwards to stay connected to my dad after the divorce. Showed up, smiled, made space for his new wife and her kids. But when he left me stranded on a cruise dock in Greece at 15, so he could keep honeymooning without me, I made a different choice. Ever been abandoned by someone you trusted most? If so, you're not alone. Drop your story in the comments. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to draw a hard line to protect your peace, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your worth. Because what happened next changed everything. I was always a weekend daughter. Fridays at 6, like clockwork, my dad would pick me up in his silver sedan, engines still running while I climbed in with my overnight bag. The ride to his place was usually quiet. Sometimes he'd ask about school, but not always. I usually filled the silence myself, chattering about whatever book I was reading or some middle school drama he didn't really follow. He'd nod, maybe throw in a wow or huh every few minutes. Still, I showed up. Every weekend, without fail. His apartment was clean, impersonal, like a hotel suite someone tried to decorate from memory. A couple framed photos of us, yes, but mostly neutral tones, a carefully stacked pile of unopened mail on the kitchen counter, and the TV always on in the background. It never felt like home, not really. It felt like a waiting room I was trying to earn a place in. When my parents divorced, I was 8. My mom had full custody, but dad got weekends and the occasional holiday if he asked in advance. At first, he did. He made an effort in those early years. We'd do pancake Saturdays or rent movies and stay up late. He let me paint one wall of the guest room, my room, in lavender. But that slowly faded. The pancakes turned into takeout, movie nights got replaced with whatever he already had queued up on his DVR, and the lavender wall got repainted when I was 12, without anyone telling me. Still, I kept showing up. I didn't want him to think I didn't care. I remember once, when I was 10, I asked if I could bring my science project over to work on during the weekend. He hesitated. Said he didn't have space for all that mess. I told him it was just a poster board. He relented, but spent most of the weekend watching football in the next room. I built the model of the solar system on the kitchen floor alone. Despite everything, I never missed a weekend. I told myself it mattered. That consistency would count for something. When he met Taylor, I was 13. He mentioned her casually over dinner one night, like she was an old coworker he'd run into. I've been seeing someone, he said, cutting into a steak. Her name's Taylor. I think you'd like her. I smiled, said cool, and kept eating. A month later, I was meeting her and her twins at a family-style restaurant with paper napkins and crayons on the table. The twins were 9, loud, and obsessed with horses. Taylor smiled a lot and asked me too many questions, like she was trying to impress me at a job interview. I knew the shift was coming. I could feel it before it happened. That first dinner turned into regular group plans. Bowling nights. Ice cream runs. Hikes, even though I hated hikes. Dad would beam when one of the twins said something clever. He'd ruffle their hair or make a joke only they understood. I noticed he'd stopped asking how school was going, or if I needed anything. The ride to his place grew even quieter. I told myself not to take it personally. She had kids, after all. He was trying to include everyone. That's what I kept repeating. I stayed polite. I laughed when I was supposed to. I helped Taylor clean up after dinner while the twins ran around the apartment. I didn't complain when our one-on-one time disappeared. I figured it was temporary. That he'd find a balance. He didn't. My 14th birthday fell on one of Dad's weekends. I hadn't had a party that year. No big plans. Just dinner out, maybe a movie, just us. But 2 days before, he called. Said something had come up. Taylor's parents had invited them to a weekend getaway. You understand, right? He asked. We'll celebrate next time. I said I understood. And then I sat on my bed for 10 minutes holding the phone before I put it down. There was no next time. The celebration never happened. I didn't bring it up. A few months later, I invited him to a school recital. I was performing a short monologue in front of the whole 8th grade and their families. I gave him the date twice, even texted him the morning of. He replied with a thumbs up. He didn't show. Later he said he got stuck in traffic and figured it would be over by the time he got there. I told him it was fine. That I didn't expect him to drop everything. He said, "Thanks for understanding," and that was that. I kept showing up anyway. When he proposed to Taylor, I found out on Facebook. A photo of her hand with a modest diamond and the caption, "She said yes." Her twins were in the background, holding a sign that said, "We're gaining a dad." I stared at it for a long time. When I finally called to ask about it, he said, "Oh yeah. I was going to tell you. It just happened really fast." I congratulated him. I meant it, sort of. I wanted him to be happy. I wanted to be included. But I didn't ask about the wedding or where I fit in. I waited to see if he'd tell me. Invite me in. Include me. He didn't. A few weeks after that call, he texted me asking if I wanted to come on their honeymoon cruise. "We'll be leaving from Greece," he wrote. "Think about it. It'll be a great bonding trip." I thought about it. I even said yes. I convinced myself it could be a fresh start. A chance to feel like a real family again. Maybe this was his way of making it up to me. That I'd earned this invitation by always being the one who stayed, who tried, who never made him feel bad even when he deserved to. I told my mom I wanted to go. She didn't fight me on it. Just made me promise to call often and keep my documents with me at all times. The plan was that I'd fly out a day before the cruise and meet them at the dock. They'd already been traveling in Europe for 2 weeks by then, just the 4 of them. I arrived with my backpack, passport, and a little hope that maybe this time, just this once, I'd feel like part of his real life again. What happened next would wipe out every ounce of that hope in less than 10 minutes. But at the time, I believed I still had a seat on that ship. That I still mattered. I believed he wouldn't leave me behind. Not his daughter. Not me. At some point, though I couldn't say exactly when, Dad stopped calling me Bug. That had been my nickname since I was 4, back when I used to follow him around the yard in little rain boots, asking about worms and dragonflies. He used to say, "You're my little bug." Always curious, always tagging along. But somewhere along the line, maybe when Taylor moved in, maybe even before, that name just disappeared. One weekend he greeted me with, "Hey," and that was it. No smile, no nickname. Just hey, like I was someone he barely recognized at the airport. I remember pausing in the doorway, waiting for more. It didn't come. At first, I thought it was stress. He'd taken on a new role at work and mentioned the hours were getting longer. So I didn't press it. I figured he'd bounce back. But the shift kept deepening. Gradual, subtle, but steady. Instead of asking me about my week, he'd ask if I minded watching the twins for a bit while he and Taylor talked logistics. When I said sure, he'd respond with a distracted, "Thanks, kid," already halfway out of the room. I'd end up helping them with homework I didn't understand, or watching them run in circles around the apartment while the adults disappeared into the home office. One weekend, I found myself folding their laundry while Taylor rested on the couch with a face mask and her phone. She smiled and said, "You're so helpful. They really look up to you." I didn't respond. I wanted to believe it was a compliment, but it felt more like a handoff. Christmas that year was the clearest sign something had shifted. The tree at Dad's was decked out like a catalog spread. Pine-scented candles, coordinated ornaments, a fire flickering on the TV screen. When it came time to open gifts, the twins unwrapped matching mountain bikes, custom colors, with their names painted across the frames. There were helmets, lights, water bottles, the whole package. I waited. Dad handed me a small envelope. Inside was a folded $50 bill and a sticky note in his handwriting. "Don't spend it all in one place, winky face." That was it. I smiled politely and said thanks. He nodded and turned back to help one of the twins adjust her new helmet strap. I sat there on the couch, holding the envelope in one hand and watching the way he knelt next to her, carefully tightening the buckle under her chin, laughing when she asked if she looked like a race car driver. The old me would have made a joke. Would have called him out playfully for forgetting to wrap something. I didn't. I just tucked the envelope into my bag and waited for dinner. I didn't mention it to Mom. She'd have wanted to say something, and that would have made it worse. Dinner that night was loud. The twins had taken to calling him Dad, casually, like it had always been that way. I don't remember him correcting them. At one point, Taylor raised her glass and said, "To family." Dad smiled and clinked his water glass against hers, then the twins. He didn't look in my direction. Later that night, I was helping Taylor clean up in the kitchen when she said, "You know, it's been really nice having a full house again. It just feels right." I nodded. I think she meant it kindly. Maybe she even believed it. But it didn't feel right to me. It felt like I'd become an accessory. Like a folding chair someone pulls out for holidays and puts back into storage after dessert. The thing with my dad is, he never outright said anything cruel. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make ultimatums. He just edited me out, piece by piece. Not out of malice, but indifference. Which, somehow, was worse. The conversation started shifting too. At dinner, he'd say things like, "You'll be off to college soon anyway," or "Taylor's really helped me rethink what family means." He never said it directly, but the message was clear. This was his new beginning, and I was part of the past he was gently moving on from. I kept showing up, though. Every other weekend. I babysat the twins when they had date nights. I pretended not to notice when my room got turned into a yoga space with a fold-out mat and Himalayan salt lamp. I started sleeping on the pull-out in the living room. And then came the cruise. He called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in the school library. I stepped outside to answer. "So," he said, upbeat, "the cruise is all booked. 10 days, Mediterranean route, starting in Greece. You're all set." I remember feeling this tiny flutter of hope. He was including me. I was going. It felt like a signal, maybe things were turning around. "Just one thing," he added. "You'll be in a separate cabin. Not far, just a few doors down from us. It's better for everyone. More space." I didn't say anything right away. He filled the silence. "You'll have your own bathroom, your own bed. It'll feel more grown up anyway. Independent." "I thought you'd like that." I said, "Okay," because that was all I ever said. But that night, I looked at the cruise itinerary he emailed me. One cabin for 4 guests, with the twins' names and Taylor's next to his. Then mine, by itself, under a different booking number. No shared suite. No connecting door. Just me alone, in a cabin assigned like a leftover piece. I tried not to read into it. Tried to tell myself I was lucky to be included at all. But something about the way he phrased it, "It's better for everyone," settled heavy in my chest. Better for who, exactly? I didn't bring it up. Not to him, not to anyone. Instead, I printed the itinerary, packed my bag, and told myself it would be fine. That maybe once we were on the boat, things would feel different. He'd relax, we'd talk, he'd remember how close we used to be. Maybe he'd call me Bug again. But deep down, I knew better. By then, I had learned that with my father, it was safer to expect less. That way, you weren't as surprised when he gave you nothing at all. We docked in Greece early that morning. The air smelled like salt and sugar, pastries from nearby vendors mixed with sea breeze, and for a moment, it felt like a dream. I'd never been abroad before. The white buildings curved up into the hills, everything warm and sunlit. People were laughing, shopping, taking pictures. We had just a few hours in port before reboarding. Taylor wanted to browse a local market, and the twins were already arguing over who got the window seat on the shuttle bus. I asked if I could grab a gelato from the stand across the street. Dad looked at his watch and said, "Be quick." That was all. Not "we'll wait here," or "let's go together." Just be quick, like he was timing me. I didn't take long. Maybe 10 minutes. I ordered a scoop of lemon in broken Greek, thanked the vendor, and turned back toward the dock. That's when I saw the ship. Not idling like it had been. Not stationary. Moving. Slow at first, then steady. The walkway was already pulled up. Staff were waving to the last few passengers still on deck. I ran. I yelled for someone. "Wait. I'm not on yet." A woman in a uniform near the gate frowned and walked toward me, motioning for me to stop. "Do you have your boarding card?" she asked. I reached for it and realized my hands were empty. I'd left everything in the cabin, my bag, my documents, even my sandals. I was wearing flip-flops, a tank top, and holding a half-melted cone. I'm with my dad. He's on board. I just went for ice cream. She spoke into her radio in another language, eyes darting back to the ship. Then a man joined her, taller, with a clipboard and a sharper tone. Name? I gave it. First and last. They asked for cabin number. I didn't know his. Just mine. They looked at each other, something passing between them I couldn't interpret. The taller one pulled out his walkie and spoke to someone on board. I waited, eyes glued to the ship. The woman took a step closer to me. There seems to be confusion, she said. Your guardian indicated you would not be returning. I stared at her. What? He said you'd be staying behind. That arrangements had been made. My stomach dropped. I shook my head. No, that's not right. He doesn't mean that. Can I talk to him? She turned to the man. He spoke into the radio again. Waited. Nodded once. Then handed it to her. She listened, then turned it down and looked at me, like she didn't want to say it. He said, "You're not his responsibility anymore." I remember the way she said it, calm, clinical, like she was reading a line from a policy manual. Like this happened all the time. I laughed. Just once. Not because it was funny, but because my brain short-circuited. I asked her to repeat it. He said you are not his responsibility. I felt everything slow down in that moment. The ship was halfway down the channel. No one on deck was looking my way. I couldn't see him. I couldn't see Taylor. I couldn't see the twins. It was like I had never existed to them at all. 15 years old. No passport. No wallet. No phone. Standing in flip-flops on concrete that was heating fast under the morning sun. I need to call my mom, I said. The man with the clipboard motioned for me to follow him. I sat in a small booth by the dock office, still holding my gelato, which had melted into a sticky soup. Someone handed me a paper towel. I wiped my hands. They asked if I remembered her number. I did. I'd never stopped memorizing it. I dialed and listened to it ring. She picked up on the third try. Hey, everything okay? I couldn't speak at first. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Hello? Are you there? He left me, I said. Her voice went quiet. What do you mean? I told her everything. The dock. The gelato. The security guard's face. The ship sailing away. His voice over the radio. She's not my responsibility. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just said, "Where are you?" I handed the phone to the dock manager. He explained the location. I watched my mother's expression flicker across his face as he repeated it, line by line. "We'll figure this out," she told me after he passed the phone back. "Don't talk to anyone else. Stay there. Someone from the U.S. Embassy will come get you. I'm on the next flight." She hung up. I sat in that office for what felt like hours. The walls were pale blue, the kind that looks colder the longer you stare at it. A woman brought me a bottled water and a small snack. I couldn't eat. No one said anything else about the cruise. I asked if there were cameras. Proof. A list of who got on, who got off. The woman shrugged. "These things happen," she said. "These things happen." It took 5 hours for someone from the embassy to arrive. An American woman in her 30s with a kind face and practical shoes. She asked questions I barely answered. Did I know anyone in Greece? No. Did I have any money? No. Did my dad give me anything before disembarking? No. Did he say goodbye? No. She didn't say much after that. Just walked me to a car and told me my mother was in the air. She had legal documents. She wasn't coming alone. That night, I stayed in a hotel near the embassy with the woman who picked me up. She ordered me a sandwich I didn't eat. She let me call my mom again. "He's not coming back for you," she said, gently. "I know." She asked if I was okay. I said yes. I wasn't. I laid on the stiff bed under a buzzing wall light, staring at the ceiling while the Mediterranean darkened outside. My phone had died hours earlier. The TV didn't work. I'd stopped crying. Not because I felt better, because there was nothing left to drain. I'd always thought betrayal would be loud. A slammed door. A screaming match. A dramatic goodbye. But mine was quiet. Just one line. Spoken into a radio. She's not my responsibility. And then silence. I didn't sleep much that night. The hotel room was too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums against your skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ship. Not moving fast, not racing away. Just pulling steadily out of view, like it knew exactly where it was going, and that I wasn't part of the plan. The woman from the embassy had given me pajamas from her own suitcase. A pair of loose cotton shorts and a college t-shirt. I put them on and laid on top of the blanket, my legs still dusty from the dock, not sure what I was supposed to do next. There was no one to call. No one else I trusted. I kept replaying what he said. She's not my responsibility anymore. I must have gone over it 50 times in my head, as if I'd misunderstood. As if maybe they'd gotten the wrong voice on the radio, or maybe he was joking in some awful, twisted way. But it was his voice. I knew it. Low, clipped, casual. Like he was confirming a reservation. The next morning, I sat on the end of the bed while the embassy liaison tried to explain the steps that were being taken. I wasn't really listening. She used phrases like temporary custody, emergency repatriation, and unaccompanied minor protocol. I just kept nodding. He listed you as an independent traveler on the cruise manifest, she said at one point, reading from a paper in her hands. It means they're not legally liable for your supervision. That hit harder than I expected. Somehow the idea that this wasn't even technically a crime made it worse. It wasn't abandonment in the legal sense. Just a choice. He'd arranged it. Pre-filled paperwork. Signed something. I wasn't forgotten. I was planned out of the picture. The flight from Toronto landed that afternoon. I saw my mom before she saw me. She came out of customs fast, like she hadn't stopped moving since she left our house. Hair tied back, duffel over one shoulder, blazer wrinkled, no makeup. Her eyes scanned the terminal until they found me. I was sitting on a metal bench by the baggage carousel, wearing the t-shirt from the night before and a pair of borrowed sandals. She didn't cry, didn't gasp or hug me dramatically. She just walked over, sat down next to me, and put her hand on my knee. "Did you eat?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. She opened her bag and pulled out a Ziploc with almonds and a slightly crushed protein bar. "Start with this." I took the food and unwrapped the bar with shaking fingers. I wasn't hungry, but I chewed anyway. She watched me for a few seconds, then pulled out her phone and opened a document. I saw the word custody in bold at the top of the screen. She had brought her lawyer. I hadn't noticed at first. He was walking a few steps behind her, a tall man in a navy suit with a rolling briefcase and tired eyes. "This is Marcus," she said. "He's here to help us navigate anything international. But once we're home, we'll handle it directly." I didn't ask what handle it meant. I didn't care yet. I just wanted to be in a room that didn't smell like disinfectant and fear. That night, we stayed at the same hotel where the embassy had placed me. My mom insisted on a double room, not adjoining. She didn't want me waking up alone. She ordered room service, pasta, salad, warm bread I tore apart but didn't eat. Marcus took a separate table near the window and opened his laptop, making quiet calls in French and writing notes in a small black notebook. When we were alone, she sat on the edge of the bed and asked me to tell her everything. Not just the doc. Everything. I started slow. The cruise. The cabin assignment. How he acted at dinner. The gelato. The port staff. Then I went backward. I told her about the bikes at Christmas. The envelope. The sticky note. The separate room with the yoga mat. The missed recital. The birthday he never rescheduled. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look shocked. She didn't ask why I didn't tell her sooner. She just listened. Every now and then, she'd type something on her phone, eyes still on me. At one point she asked, "Do you remember the name of the cruise coordinator?" I did. I'd seen the name in the email. She typed it in. "Good," she said, and kept going. When I got to the part about the radio, what he said, I stopped talking. I couldn't say it again. Saying it once had been hard enough. I looked down at the untouched salad. She filled in the silence. "He said you weren't his responsibility." I nodded. She reached into her bag and pulled out a legal pad, flipped to the second page, and circled something. "I just needed to hear you say it. For the record." I didn't cry. Not yet. I think I was still waiting for someone to apologize. Not Dad, obviously. That was long gone. But someone. The cruise line. The embassy. A stranger. Anyone. But it turns out when you're dropped by your own parent in a foreign country, there's no script. No hotline for this specific flavor of betrayal. It's too quiet to be called trauma by most people. Too administrative to make the news. Too gray to fully explain without sounding like you're overreacting. I wasn't bruised. I wasn't hit. I wasn't even yelled at. He just left. And that kind of abandonment doesn't show up in X-rays. But you feel it anyway, in every corner of your body. We flew home 2 days later. Mom had pushed for an earlier flight, but it was the best she could get. In the meantime, Marcus arranged to have all documentation filed with the Canadian Embassy and started collecting records from the cruise line. He kept saying, "We'll be ready when we land." On the flight back, I slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, my mom was watching a movie with the subtitles on. She hadn't moved. "You're safe," she said, without looking away from the screen. I nodded. Back in Toronto, the air felt heavy. Familiar, but colder. The sun was setting when we pulled into our driveway. Marcus was on the phone in the back seat, whispering about jurisdiction and service timelines. My mom walked me inside, helped me put my bag down, and said, "You're not going back there. Not even to talk." I didn't argue. That night, I stood in the shower for 20 minutes. The water kept going hot to lukewarm, back and forth. I scrubbed my arms like there was something I needed to remove. Something left over from the dock. From the silence. From that voice on the radio. I went to bed without brushing my hair. My mom sat on the edge of my bed for a while, just like she used to when I was little. Before she turned off the light, she said, "When we're ready, we'll make sure this doesn't just disappear." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't dramatic. Just a promise. He'd made a decision. Now it was our turn. 3 days after we got home, the envelope was ready. It sat on the kitchen counter in a heavy manila folder with a small tab that read, "To be served." Marcus had typed up a formal memo to accompany the paperwork, all in legal language I didn't fully understand. Words like modification of custodial arrangement, immediate suspension of visitation, retroactive support obligation, and intent to seek damages in civil court. My mom stood over the counter that morning with her coffee, scanning the contents again even though she'd already gone through it with Marcus the night before. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't shaking. She was calm in a way that felt cold at first, but I realized later it was just resolve. "We're not asking him to be a father," she said. "We're stating that he isn't one." I didn't say much. I think part of me still believed it wouldn't matter. That he'd ignore it the same way he ignored everything else. But Marcus explained it differently. He'll care. Maybe not about you, but about being seen. We didn't send it to his house directly. It was delivered to his office by a professional process server. At 10:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. We got confirmation of receipt within the hour. He didn't call that day. Or the next. But 3 days later, a voicemail showed up on my mom's phone. He hadn't called me. He didn't have the nerve. He left it for her instead. She waited until I got home from school to play it. Sat me down on the couch, opened the file, and tapped play. His voice cracked immediately. He was crying or trying to. "Diane, I don't know what she told you, but this is a massive misunderstanding. I didn't mean to leave her. Taylor thought she was still with us. There was a mix-up with the cruise manifest. I thought she was with the twins. We didn't realize she'd gotten off the ship." He paused. You could hear a chair squeaking in the background. Maybe he was pacing, or maybe he was just trying to come up with the next excuse. "Please, can we just talk? I'll explain everything. I never wanted it to go this far. It's not how it sounds. Tell her I love her. I really do. She's my daughter." He never said my name. The message ended. My mom didn't look up right away. She just closed her phone and set it on the coffee table. "He's panicking," she said. "That means he's taking it seriously." I didn't ask to listen to it again. Once was enough. It wasn't the crying that got to me. It was how fast he reached for an excuse that didn't exist. How easily he slipped into the story that would protect him. He hadn't sounded sorry. He sounded caught. That was the last time he tried to contact us directly for almost a year. There was no apology letter, no email, no birthday card. But there were lawyers. His legal team sent a carefully worded response asking to pause proceedings for mediation and clarification. Marcus laughed when he read it. "That's not a denial," he said. "That's a PR strategy." I didn't respond. My name was on the paperwork, but I let the adults handle the rest. I was still 15. Still technically a minor. Still, in some way, considered a child in the eyes of the court. But I'd never felt less like one. The official motion to terminate visitation moved forward. So did the request for retroactive support, backdated to the year he stopped contributing to school expenses. We weren't filing for damages. Marcus thought that would just draw things out, but we were making a formal record. A record that said, you don't get to erase your child without consequences. That spring, I started therapy. My mom found a woman downtown who specialized in family estrangement. She had a soft voice and a spare office that smelled like peppermint. The first session, I just sat on the couch and stared at the bookshelf for 40 minutes. When she asked how I felt about my father, I said, "I don't think I feel anything." She nodded. That's not uncommon. I wasn't trying to be brave. I was just hollow. At school, I didn't talk about what happened. I told my closest friend that the trip was cut short and we had a family emergency. She didn't press. I kept my head down, got through exams, avoided any topic that might circle back to parents or vacations or step-siblings. People assumed I was fine. That summer, my mom got word that his side had agreed to the termination terms, no contest. He didn't even want to see you one last time, the therapist asked during a session in July. No, I said. He just wanted it over with. It wasn't a clean break. Nothing ever is. His name still showed up on forms. His contact info still lived in old school files. Occasionally, the mail brought something addressed to parent or guardian. But legally, it was done. He was no longer listed as a custodial guardian. Visitation was revoked. Any future contact would have to go through counsel. For the first time since I was 8 years old, there was no schedule. No weekends. No drop-offs. Just silence. Sometimes, I caught myself wondering what he told Taylor. What version of the story he spun for the twins. Did he say I decided not to come? That I walked off the ship? That I didn't want to be part of their new family? I'd never know. What I did know was this. He'd gambled that I wouldn't make a fuss. That I'd cry a little, disappear quietly, and let him move on. But my mom didn't give him that luxury. She drew a hard line in the sand and said, "This is where you end." And when it was over, she didn't celebrate. She just came into my room one afternoon while I was working on an essay and set a folder on my desk. Inside was a stamped court order and a letter from Marcus. "No one gets to do that to you again," she said simply. Not even him. I looked down at the paper. It was just ink. Signatures. A file number. But it felt like a boundary. A door shutting. And behind it, all the excuses I never asked for. All the love I never got. All the weekends I kept showing up, waiting for a father who had already moved on. That door stayed closed. And for the first time, I didn't feel locked out. I felt free. It started with a text from my half-aunt, Karen, my dad's stepsister from his first marriage, who always hovered somewhere between family and polite acquaintance. We hadn't spoken in months. "Hey, kiddo. I don't mean to stir anything, but did you hear about your dad?" I didn't respond right away. Just stared at the screen, thumb frozen over the reply. She followed up a minute later. "Taylor left. Took the girls. Back to Oregon, I think." That was it. No exclamation point. No emoji. Just a sentence that landed with the weight of something I hadn't asked for, but couldn't ignore. I didn't ask why. But I didn't have to. 2 weeks later, another message came, this time from a former neighbor of his who still talked to my mom sometimes. She worked in finance, same field as my dad, and they'd had mutual clients years ago. FYI, he's not at Belmont and Company anymore. Don't know the full story, but someone said it was related to a breakdown. Missed meetings. Erratic behavior. The usual. Again, I didn't reply. I didn't even feel satisfaction. It was something closer to detachment, like watching an old building collapse from a distance. There's no thrill in watching the person who hurt you unravel. Not when you've already buried the version of them you once needed. I never confirmed the details. Never asked Karen what happened, never checked Taylor's social media to see if she had posted a new beginning in Oregon with her girls. What I did do was go to therapy twice a week. I didn't always want to talk. Some sessions I sat in silence, peeling the corner of a tissue and staring at the rug. Other days I couldn't stop. Stories poured out in fragments, looping and contradictory, like I was trying to solve a mystery that had no clear culprit. Was he always like this? Did something change? Was it me? My therapist never tried to answer. She just kept bringing me back to the same truth. What he did wasn't a reflection of my worth. It wasn't personal, even though it felt like the most personal thing in the world. She once said, sometimes people treat their children like placeholders until something more convenient comes along. That has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with who they are when no one's watching. That line stuck with me. I stopped watching. I deleted him from my social media. Blocked his number. I didn't want to track his life from a distance. I didn't need to see if he was sad or lonely or pretending everything was fine. I wasn't pretending anymore. By the start of senior year, things looked different. I started researching colleges, places far from home, far from the neighborhood that still carried echoes of weekend pickups and missed birthdays. I applied to schools in 3 provinces and 5 U.S. states. One of them was in Colorado, small, cold, nestled in a town I'd never heard of until a guidance counselor handed me a brochure. I applied on a whim. No legacy. No connection. Just something that felt clean. They offered me admission with partial scholarship and a note that read, "We were impressed with your personal statement." I didn't tell them what it was about. But it centered on resilience. On starting over. On choosing your own version of family. I accepted the offer 2 weeks later. My mom hugged me when I told her. She didn't cry. Just held me for a few seconds and said, "You're gonna love it there." She helped me find housing, fill out financial aid, look for part-time work in the area. We ordered a used mini fridge off Craigslist and found a second-hand suitcase at a consignment shop near the airport. Packing was strange. It felt less like leaving and more like finally stepping into something that had been waiting for me to catch up. The night before I left, I sat on my bed and looked at a shoebox full of old photos. Some of me as a kid, at soccer games, school plays, the zoo. A few of my dad were in there, too. There was one of us at the beach. I must have been 6 or 7. He was holding my hand, both of us squinting into the sun. I didn't throw it away. I just put it at the bottom of the box and slid the lid back on. It belonged to a chapter that was over. That fall, I moved into a tiny dorm room with cinder block walls and a closet the size of a phone booth. My roommate was from New Mexico. She had a cactus on the windowsill and talked in her sleep. We weren't instant best friends. But she was kind. The first time she asked about my family, I gave a short version. Just said, "It's complicated." She didn't push. I liked that. The air in Colorado was thinner than I expected. It made walking uphill harder, but it also felt cleaner somehow. Lighter. I got a part-time job at a campus cafe and started tutoring other students in writing. My life became small in a good way. Study, work, sleep. Snow in the mornings. Oatmeal in the dining hall. Texts from my mom on Sundays. No more waiting for a call that never came. No more checking Facebook to see if he remembered my birthday. He didn't. But I didn't need him to. I remember one afternoon in late October, walking across campus with a hot tea in one hand and my laptop bag in the other. The sky was turning orange and someone was playing guitar near the student center. I stopped for a second and looked around. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel abandoned. I just felt free. Not in a movie ending kind of way. Not triumphant or euphoric. Just quiet. Real. The kind of freedom that comes when you realize someone's absence isn't a wound. It's a space you get to fill on your own terms. I still went to therapy. Still had days where the past crept in. But I wasn't stuck anymore. The ship had sailed. And this time, I wasn't the one left behind. I was the one who got off and never looked back. The letter came in late March, a few weeks before my 18th birthday. It was handwritten on thick, cream-colored paper and postmarked from a city just outside Toronto. No return address. Just my name, in the kind of cursive that's too careful to be natural. I knew it was from him before I opened it. My birthday wasn't for another 10 days. I hadn't expected anything. Hadn't even thought about the possibility. But there it was, waiting inside my dorm mailbox between a campus safety flyer and a takeout menu. I carried it back to my room without opening it. Set it on my desk. Stared at it for a full hour while I answered emails and half-watched a documentary on my laptop. Then I picked it up, slid my thumb under the envelope flap, and pulled the letter out. It was 5 paragraphs long. No greeting, no dear. Just started mid-thought, like I'd already been listening. He said he'd been going to therapy, that he was working through some things, that he'd made mistakes, a lot of them, he wrote, and that leaving me behind in Greece was the worst moment of my life. He didn't apologize directly. He said things like I didn't know how to handle the pressure and Taylor, and I weren't in a good place. He used phrases like emotional spiral, miscommunication, and poor judgment. Not abandonment. Not betrayal. He said he was hoping we could reconnect. That he was in recovery, doing better now, learning how to be more present. That he missed me. That he thought about me often. That he'd always love me, even if I couldn't forgive him. There was no mention of Taylor. No update on the twins. Just a request for a response. Any response. I reread it twice. Then I put it back in the envelope, slid it into a drawer, and didn't touch it for a week. When I finally sat down to write back, it was a Thursday. The weather was warming up, and I could hear students playing music outside the dorm courtyard. I didn't labor over it. I didn't make a draft. I just opened a notebook, tore out a clean sheet, and wrote 3 lines. You left me on a dock. That doesn't go away with time. I wish you peace. I didn't sign it love or from. I just wrote my name, folded it neatly, sealed it in a plain white envelope. I didn't send it right away. I waited another 3 days. I wanted to be sure I wasn't writing out of anger. I wasn't. I was writing from clarity. He had the right to ask for forgiveness. I had the right to keep my distance. When I finally dropped it in the mail slot, I felt strangely calm. Not satisfied. Not vindicated. Just done. I hadn't closed the door completely, but I'd locked it. And I kept the key. After that, he didn't write again. At least not right away. For a long time, that was enough for me. I didn't need a reunion. I didn't need some grand reckoning. I had my life. I was taking summer classes, working weekends at a local coffee shop. My roommate was transferring, so I applied for a single dorm and started planning how to make it feel more like my own space. My mom came to visit in July. She brought snacks, cleaning supplies, and a list of questions about my professors. We sat on a bench by the student center, eating lukewarm sandwiches and catching up. At one point she asked, "Do you ever think you'll see him again?" I shrugged. Maybe, but on my terms. She nodded. That was enough. We didn't talk about it more. But later that night, she left a small envelope on my desk before heading back to her hotel. Inside was a photo I hadn't seen before, me at 9, holding a seashell on a beach somewhere. My dad was in the background, just slightly out of focus. There was a sticky note on the back. "You were always the one shining in the picture." I didn't know what she meant exactly, but I kept the photo, taped it inside my notebook. That fall, he sent another letter. Shorter this time. No explanations. Just a birthday card with a blank space inside and a short message. "If you ever change your mind, I'll be here." No return address again. I didn't write back. But I didn't tear it up either. I put it with the first one. In a box under my bed with old textbooks, letters from friends, and a few small things I hadn't figured out how to let go of yet. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a full circle. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Like choosing not to answer, not because you're bitter, but because you've already answered the most important question: who gets access to your heart? And who lost that right the moment they let go of your hand? He may have been working on himself. Maybe. But I was building something stronger, quiet, steady, self-earned trust. Not in him. In me. That was the only reconciliation I needed. I'm 26 now. I live in a quiet apartment with high windows and a stubborn radiator that hisses in the winter. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. I bought the rug in the living room after my first paycheck. The bookshelf I built myself over a long weekend with a YouTube tutorial and too many missing screws. It leans slightly to one side, but it holds everything I care about: books, photos, a small glass dish filled with shells I picked up on a beach in Greece. I went back last year. Not for closure. Not to forgive anyone. Just to see it for myself again on my terms. My mom came with me. We planned it for months. Booked modest hotels, avoided cruises, mapped out the ferry schedule ourselves. She brought a guidebook full of handwritten notes and restaurant suggestions. I brought the original itinerary from the cruise, just out of curiosity. When we got to the port, I knew the exact spot. The booth where I sat. The dock where the ship had pulled away. The stand where I'd ordered lemon gelato with too many coins in my palm, trying to get the math right. It looked smaller than I remembered. I stood there quietly for a minute, my mom beside me. Neither of us said much. Then she reached for my hand and said, "Let's walk." So we did. We wandered through the narrow streets, stopped for lunch near a cluster of pastel houses, bought a magnet from a woman selling them under an umbrella that kept blowing sideways in the wind. Later, we found a small beach tucked behind a row of fig trees. I picked up a shell and slipped it into my pocket. We do one trip a year now, just the two of us. Greece was the first. The next was Iceland. Then Croatia. We don't talk about him much. There's no need. The last I heard, he moved cities again. Maybe for work, maybe to chase some new version of himself. He still sends a Christmas card every year. Always signed the same way, "Thinking of you, Dad." I never open them. I stack them in a drawer in my filing cabinet, beneath tax documents, passport renewals, and old course syllabi I never threw out. It's not anger that keeps me from reading them. It's disinterest. I've spent more than half my life without him now. And it's not the absence I remember. It's the after. The rebuilding. The way I stopped waiting for someone to circle back. I got my passport when I was 19, standing in line at a downtown government office with all my paperwork in a folder and a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. It felt like something small, just an ID. But when they handed it to me, I felt something shift. It was proof that I didn't need anyone else to claim me, that I could go anywhere from anywhere. I've had a few different jobs since college. Interned at a nonprofit. Worked admin at a law office. Now I'm a program coordinator for a community education initiative. I help young people, some just a few years younger than I was back then, navigate applications, deadlines, paperwork. I've learned to say no without guilt. I've learned how to answer hard questions without flinching. And I've learned that boundaries don't make you cruel. They make you whole. Once, at a training seminar, someone asked us to name a formative moment that shaped the way we approach relationships. Most people shared stories about mentors, friendships, team projects. I said, I was left behind once, and I survived. Everything since then has been a choice I made on purpose. No one pressed me. But a few people nodded. There's a quiet solidarity in surviving something unspeakable. It doesn't need a headline. It just needs space. I still go to therapy. Not as often, but enough. I've dated. Some relationships lasted a year, others just a few months. I'm cautious, but not closed off. I look for actions, not promises. And I don't try to earn anyone's love anymore. That's probably the biggest difference. I don't shapeshift to fit what someone else needs me to be. I stay exactly as I am. And if that's not enough for them, then they're not for me. If you asked me what I've learned from all of it, from that doc, that silence, that voice on the radio, it's this: the people who leave you behind don't deserve to lead you forward. Abandonment isn't your shame. It's theirs to carry. And forgiveness, if it comes at all, should be slow and earned. Not demanded like a refund on a trip gone wrong. I don't hate him. But I don't miss him either. He made a choice. And I made one too. To build a life that doesn't bend around his absence. To fill it with people who show up and stay. And to never again wait on the edge of something, hoping someone turns around. Because the truth is, when they show you they're willing to leave you behind, you believe them. And then you begin. If you've ever had to rebuild after someone you trusted walked away, I see you. What would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever had to cut ties with a parent or choose peace over apology? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this if it hit home, and don't forget to follow for more true stories about boundaries, healing, and taking your power back. Because sometimes the real closure is never going back.